Hello everyone. Today I'm sharing with you my recipe for gluten-free conchas. Have you ever had a concha before you went gluten-free, that is? Or maybe you're asking, what is a concha? A concha is simply a type of pan dulce, which literally translates to sweetbread in Spanish. And the name concha means shell, because conchas are decorated with beautiful, colorful streusel shells, and also some other patterns too. They are irresistible, you guys, whether you eat them straight up, dip them in coffee or Mexican hot chocolate, or cut them open and slather them with butter. So let's get into it and I'll show you how to make them. This recipe starts with one of my favorite dough recipes ever, my gluten-free sweet dough. It is the basis of many a recipe you'll find on my YouTube channel and my blog, so I'm not going to go into how to make the actual dough here. It's as simple as dumping ingredients into a bowl and mixing, proofing, and refrigerating. Tap on the video above for how to do this. Before I start kneading the dough, let's make the streusel. So the streusel is very simple. It starts with 148 grams of butter that's very soft. You can also use dairy-free, and 125 grams of powdered sugar. And I'm just mixing this with my spatula in a small bowl because it's just so easy to come together. As long as your butter is nice and room temperature or soft, it is very easy to do. Less dishes, no problem. I'm going to add to that 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and I'll mix that through just a little bit. And then this is a 1/4 teaspoon each of baking powder and salt. And finally, this is 175 grams of Kim's all-purpose gluten-free flour blend. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get in here with my hand and just mix it up with my hand. It's so much easier to feel where you need to squeeze it and all of that. So my hands are clean and I'm just going to do this real quick. And once it's into a nice dough like this, I'm going to separate it out. Now, earlier I had already made some pink, but right now I'm just going to make some regular vanilla and some chocolate. So I'll separate this out and leave the vanilla in one spot, and the chocolate I'm going to add about 15 grams, which is about 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder, and a little bit of milk. I'd say this is about a 1/2 tablespoon or so. And I'm just mixing this through until it makes a nice chocolate dough. I'm going to actually dump this onto the counter now and just use my hands to mix it through. And it's okay if it's not completely mixed, like if it's marbled like this, because actually that's how some of these conchas are made, is the marble effect, and I'll show you that towards the end when we're making these, how cool the marble ones look. All right, the streusels are done. Let's go ahead and knead the dough. This is actually a double batch of the dough needed for this recipe. I always make a double batch or a full batch of this dough because there is always something I can use with the other half. So I'm just going to take out half of this dough and put the rest of the dough in the fridge for another purpose, because there are so many things you can make with this dough. Donuts, cinnamon rolls, hamburger buns, all kinds of things you can make with this dough. And I'll just knead this quickly until it's smooth. There is no reason for kneading it to develop gluten, because obviously this is gluten-free. But a lot of people will ask me, why bother kneading it when you're not developing gluten? And the reason is just so you can release a lot of those air bubbles, kind of like punching down dough in the gluten-filled world. And also to make a nice smooth dough, because as you saw in the beginning, the dough was not very smooth at all, and we want it to be nice and smooth. Okay, this looks good. So now I'm going to break out my scale and divide it into roughly 2.8 to 3 ounce pieces. and that will be 8 pieces. You don't have to use a scale. You can estimate, you can just eyeball it. I'm not very good with eyeballing, so that's why I'm using my scale. We'll go ahead and roll each of these into a nice taut round ball. This is what I do. I kind of pull up the corners and the edges on a well-floured surface and just go around like that until I have somewhat of a ball-ish shape. And then I pinch the bottom, flip it over, and on an unfloured surface, manipulate it into a round taut ball using my cupped hand. And you need an unfloured surface for this part of it, or you won't get that friction that's really required to get a nice taut ball. And it's okay if this sticks a little bit to the counter, because you can always use a bench scraper and just slide it right underneath it and pull it up. I do that all the time. My bench scraper is probably my most used equipment in the kitchen, and it's so cheap. And we're just going to place these on a parchment lined baking sheet, about 2 to 3 inches apart, just so they'll have room to spread, because they will be giant rolls once you are done with it. And then what we want to do is press down on them to flatten them at this stage, and then we'll do it again a little bit later. And then we'll go ahead and mix together an egg wash. This is 1 egg mixed with about a tablespoon of water and a pinch of salt, and brush each of them with an egg wash all over. That's going to help the streusel stick. Okay, now for the fun part. I'm going to take a little smaller than a golf ball sized portion of the streusel, and I'm going to roll it into a nice ball, and I'm going to flatten it between 2 sheets of wax paper. You can also use parchment as well. I prefer wax because it has like kind of a slick surface for peeling off later. And I'm going to roll this out into just a rough circle. It doesn't need to be perfect. None of these are ever perfect. There's always cracks, and that's just the rustic nature of them. This looks about good. I'm going to peel it off and place it right on one of the dough balls, pressing along the sides and the bottom. It's okay if there's some overlapping on the sides, or pressed out on the bottom, because that just means that much more crunchiness, crunchy, sweet streuselness to these rolls. In fact, I've seen some people make these rolls and they put like a skirt around the bottom of the streusel, and maybe that's just so you can have even more streusel in every bite. I don't know. They look fabulous though, so I'll have to try that one day. But right now I'm just going for the traditional, the way it's supposed to be, and what I've seen in so many different videos, and what I know right now. So without getting into new stuff. So this is that pink that I made, that I told you about, that I made earlier. It's a little softer because it's been sitting out a little more than what I just made, the chocolate and the vanilla. So I should have probably put this in the refrigerator for a little bit, because it is harder to peel off, but I'm just going to go with it. And my circle looks nothing like a circle, but that's all right, because it's just going to be folded over the top. So I'll get this off carefully, because it is really soft, and it's kind of warm here today. It's like in the 80s. So it's making it even harder. But we'll just go ahead and get all of these covered. And then once they are covered, we can get to the scoring, the best part. By the way, on this one, I marbled the pink and chocolate together. I think it looks really cool. You don't have to do this, just an optional thing. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the back of a paring knife, and I'm just scoring through just the streusel if I can help it. So I'm being very cautious of that, and not just score the dough as well. And I'm just making a grid pattern in this one, and I'll go and do all of the grid patterns first. So I'll do half of them grid pattern, half of them seashells. You can also do them, like rounds, or however you want to do them, but make sure you flatten them, because I forgot to do that the first time I made these, or the second time, I can't remember now. I've made so many of them that they ended up really puffing up in the oven, and the streusel just separated completely, and there was no design to it whatsoever, and there was like half the roll didn't have streusel on it, and it was all pushed to one side. So try to flatten them like I just did, and you will come out with beautiful, beautiful rolls. Okay, to make the shells now, this is what I do. They actually sell shell concha cutters, but I just looked at one of those and kind of came up with the pattern based on that. So I'm using my biscuit cutter, and I just put it like a half moon on one side, and then just carefully put one half of the biscuit cutter along each side to make the shell shape, and it's just really that simple. So I'm going to go through and do the rest of the shells now. So we're going to cover this loosely with plastic wrap, and we're going to let them rise for about 30 minutes depending on your temperature. It could take longer. You can get the oven preheated to 350 degrees. And when they're ready, this is how you can tell. I mean, obviously they're a little bit bigger, and the way you can tell is see this dough peeking through here. You can see the dough peeking through, and all the design is separating, and that's when you know they're ready to go into the oven. So get them in the oven at 350 Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. And here they are, fresh out of the oven. Look at these, you guys. Look at how good they look. Aren't they gorgeous? They taste even better, and they look just like authentic Mexican conchas. So we have to let them cool just a little bit, but they can be eaten warm actually, because they are not an entire loaf of bread, and they're not going to be gummy inside. So these are still slightly warm. Let's break into one of these. I think I'll go with the pink shell. See, there's like the skirt of streusel around the bottom. So you get streusel in pretty much every bite. These rolls are as soft as can be, and that streusel is slightly crunchy. It's sweet. They're so irresistible, you guys. You will not believe you've lived your life without them once you tried them. They are just that good. So I hope you get a chance to try them, and I hope you like them as much as we do. Enjoy.